James had always been a hard-working man. He had built a successful career and provided for his family. But something had always felt missing. His wife, Lily, was kind, beautiful, and supportive, but lately, their marriage had become strained. It wasn't just the small disagreements they had. It was a feeling of distance. The spark they once had seemed to fade. And James found himself growing more distant from Lily, feeling the weight of his unspoken frustrations. The idea had been building in his mind for some time. He wasn't happy anymore, and he couldn't pretend that everything was fine. He thought that by stepping away, he could find the freedom he craved, the space to think and figure out who he was outside of his marriage. James kept convincing himself that leaving Lily would be the solution to his unhappiness. He had become numb to the reality of what his actions would mean for their family, and soon he made up his mind. One evening after dinner, when the children were in bed, James sat down with Lily on the couch. She looked at him curiously, sensing that something was wrong. "Lily," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "I think it's time we faced the truth. I need to leave. I can't do this anymore." Lily was stunned. Her face fell as the words hit her like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean? You're talking about leaving me?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with disbelief. James nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "I think we've drifted apart. I'm just not happy, and I don't think we're good for each other anymore." Lily was silent for a long moment. Her eyes were filled with hurt, but she remained calm. "But we've built a life together, James. We've built this family." James could feel the weight of her words, but he was firm in his decision. "I know it's not easy, but I need to do this for myself. I need to find what's missing in my life." The silence between them was deafening. It was clear that Lily was struggling to understand. "What about the kids?" she asked, her voice breaking. "What about our family? James, we've been through so much together." James felt a pang of guilt in his chest, but he pushed it down. "I'll still be here for them. I just can't stay in a marriage that isn't working." He stood up, ready to walk out. He had made up his mind, and nothing was going to change it. Lily looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes, but she said nothing more. She knew the words she wanted to say, but somehow they didn't come. With a heavy heart, James packed a few of his things and left that night, leaving behind the life they had built together. The road ahead was uncertain, but he believed that leaving would give him the answers he was searching for. As James drove away, he felt a mix of relief and sadness. He didn't realize it then, but this decision would change everything. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would teach him the true meaning of family and responsibility. For now, James just felt the emptiness of the decision he had made, unaware that the very choice he thought would bring him peace would soon bring him face to face with a reality that would change his world completely. James spent the first few weeks after leaving Lily trying to adjust to his new life. At first, there was a sense of freedom. He no longer had to worry about the arguments or the tension that had built up between him and Lily. He thought that leaving would bring him peace, but instead, he was met with a growing sense of emptiness. He moved into a small apartment in the city, away from the life he had known. The apartment was bare, with just a few pieces of furniture. It was a temporary place, he told himself, until he figured out what he truly wanted. But as the days turned into weeks, James began to feel the weight of his decision. He started going to work early and staying late, hoping that the busy hours would distract him from the feelings that kept creeping up on him. But no matter how much work he threw himself into, there was always a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. He missed his children. He missed Lily. He missed the sense of warmth and love that had once filled his home. One evening, after a long day at work, James sat alone in his apartment, staring out the window at the city lights. The silence around him felt deafening. He picked up his phone, scrolling through old pictures of his family. There was one of him and Lily, smiling at a family picnic, and another of him holding one of their children on his shoulders. The memories came rushing back, and James felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had made a mistake. He knew it now, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he couldn't turn back the clock. Lily had every right to be angry with him, and the kids, his children, deserved better than a father who walked away. The next day, at work, James tried to focus, but his mind kept drifting. He found himself thinking about Lily and the kids more than he ever had before. He wondered how they were coping without him. He had always been there, playing the role of a father and a husband, but now he felt like an outsider in his own family. When he got home that evening, James decided to call Lily. It had been weeks since they had spoken, and he wasn't sure what to expect. When she answered the phone, there was a brief pause before she spoke. "James," she said, her voice distant. "I've been thinking about everything," James said, his voice shaky. "I'm sorry, Lily. I should have never left. I miss the kids, and I miss you. I made a mistake." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. James could hear Lily's soft breathing, and then, finally, she spoke. "It's not that simple, James," she said. "You can't just leave and expect everything to be okay. I can't just forget what you've done." James felt the sting of her words. He knew she was right. He couldn't expect her to forgive him overnight, but the weight of his regret felt heavier with each passing second. "I know," James said quietly, "but I want to make things right. I want to be there for the kids. I want to be a better father." There was another pause before Lily spoke again, her voice softer this time. "We'll see, James. We'll see." James hung up the phone feeling both relieved and more lost than ever. He wanted to make things right, but he had no idea where to start. The guilt he felt for walking away was still heavy in his heart, and he knew that repairing his relationship with Lily would take time. But he was willing to try. The decision he had made to leave his family had set in motion a chain of events that James couldn't control. And now, as he looked ahead, he had no idea how he would fix the mess he had made. All he knew was that he had to try, for his children, for Lily, and for himself. It had been a few more weeks since James had reached out to Lily. He spent his days thinking about the phone call, hoping that it was the first step toward reconciliation. He missed his children terribly, and despite the pain he had caused, he knew he needed to make things right. But something unexpected was about to happen that would change his life once again. One afternoon, as James sat in his apartment, lost in thought, his phone rang. He looked down to see Lily's name on the screen. His heart skipped a beat. He quickly answered, his voice filled with nervous anticipation. "Hello," he said, trying to sound calm. "James." Lily's voice was steady, but there was something different about her tone. "I have something to tell you." James immediately felt a knot in his stomach. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" Lily took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm pregnant." James froze. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. For a moment, he wondered if he had misunderstood her. "Pregnant," James repeated, his voice low. "Lily, are you sure? How far along are you?" Lily sighed softly, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in her voice. "I'm due in a few months. And James, there's more. I didn't want to tell you this over the phone, but I'm expecting quadruplets." James could hardly process the words. Quadruplets. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of it. He had left Lily, believing that he was walking away from a broken marriage, but now, his world had been turned upside down. 4 children. He had no idea what to feel. His first reaction was confusion and then overwhelming guilt. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice trembling. Lily's tone softened. "Yes, James. I've been to the doctor. I wanted to wait until I knew for sure before I told you. But now you know." James sat down on the edge of the couch, his thoughts swirling. He felt like his world was spinning out of control. How could he have walked away from Lily, not knowing she was carrying so much? He had never expected this, and he had no idea how to react. For a long moment, there was silence between them. James could hear Lily's quiet breathing, but he couldn't find the words to respond. He had made such a huge mistake by leaving, but now he had an opportunity to be part of his children's lives. 4 children, all his. The reality was overwhelming. James, Lily's voice broke the silence. I know things are complicated, but I think you should be here. You need to be here for our children. I don't know what the future holds, but I can't do this alone. James's heart felt heavy as he considered her words. How could he make this right? How could he be the father these children needed when he had abandoned their mother? There was so much he needed to make up for, but one thing was clear. He couldn't ignore his responsibility any longer. Okay, he said finally, his voice quiet but determined. I'll come to see you. I want to be there for them. I want to help. Lily's sigh of relief was evident. I'm glad, James. It's going to be tough, but we can figure this out together. As James hung up the phone, he sat in silence, overwhelmed by the news. 4 children. He didn't know what the future would bring, but one thing was certain. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. He had left thinking that he needed to find himself, but now he realized that the life he was searching for was right in front of him all along. The journey ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in months, James felt a sense of hope. He was going to be a father, and this time, he wasn't going to walk away. James stood outside the door of Lily's house, his heart racing. He hadn't seen her in weeks, and the thought of facing her again filled him with anxiety. But today, he wasn't just coming to apologize. Today, he was going to meet his children. The 4 children he never even knew existed. The idea of meeting them was both exciting and overwhelming. 4 little lives that were part of him. He couldn't help but wonder what they would be like. Would they look like him? Would they even want to know him? Lily opened the door, and for a moment, their eyes met. The past tension between them was still there, but there was something different now. A sense of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, they could make things work for the sake of the children. James, Lily said softly, stepping aside to let him in. They're inside. He nodded, trying to calm the butterflies in his stomach. I'm ready, he said, though his voice betrayed him. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he had to try. As he walked into the living room, his eyes were drawn to the 4 little faces that looked up at him. They were sitting on the floor, playing with toys, completely unaware of the impact this moment would have on their lives. Lily bent down to their level and spoke gently. Kids, this is your dad. James could see the curiosity in their eyes. They were so young, their faces still full of innocence. The oldest, a boy who looked around 5 years old, stood up and walked over to him. He extended his hand and said, Hi, I'm Jordan. James smiled, kneeling down to meet him. Hi, Jordan, he said softly, shaking his hand. It's good to meet you. The other 3 children, Nia, Noah, and Ava, watched from a distance, still unsure of what was happening. James looked at each of them, his heart swelling with emotion. They were his children, and it felt surreal to be meeting them for the first time. Lily stood in the background, watching quietly. She had been through so much on her own, raising 4 young children. But now, with James standing in the room, she saw a small glimpse of hope. Maybe things could change. Maybe they could find a way to co-parent and give their children the family they deserved. James took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He didn't know how to be a father to 4 children, but he was determined to try. He looked at them, smiling as he realized that he didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be there for them. Would you like to play with us, Dad? Maya asked shyly, her big brown eyes watching him with curiosity. James felt a lump in his throat. I'd love to, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He sat down with them, slowly beginning to interact with each child. They played games, and as he did, he felt the weight of his earlier mistakes. But he also felt something new, a sense of connection, a sense of belonging. These were his children, and he wasn't going to let them down again. As the afternoon passed, the laughter of the children filled the room. James watched them, his heart overflowing with love. He knew that he had a long way to go to prove himself as a father, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. He was a father, and that was a role he was ready to embrace. Later that evening, as the kids went to bed, Lily sat down with James. The air was still between them, but there was something more open, more understanding now. "I'm glad you're here," Lily said, her voice soft. James nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I'm glad too." It wasn't going to be easy, and it would take time. But as James looked at the small family he had left behind, he realized that he was ready to rebuild. He had a second chance, one he wasn't going to waste. James had never imagined that fatherhood would be this hard. After his first visit with Lily and the children, he felt a sense of hope that things might get better. But now, as days passed, he realized just how much he had missed. The challenges of being a father to 4 young children were overwhelming. The first few weeks were filled with ups and downs. James tried to be involved, spending time with the children after work. But he was still learning how to be a parent. Every day, it felt like there was something new to figure out. The kids each had their own personalities. Jordan, the oldest, was full of energy and loved to ask questions about everything. Mia, a few years younger, was quiet and sweet, often drawing pictures of her family. Noah, with his curious eyes, would always want to know how things worked, and little Ava, the youngest, loved to giggle and make everyone smile. Despite the joy they brought into his life, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was constantly falling short. He hadn't been there for them for so long, and it was as if he had to start from scratch. The kids were still getting used to him. They had their own routine with Lily, and now he was trying to fit into that world. Sometimes, the children would act distant, and James felt rejected, even though he knew they were just trying to adjust to this new reality. James often found himself questioning whether he was doing enough. Lily was patient with him, but there were moments when he could see the tiredness in her eyes. Raising 4 children on her own had been a massive responsibility, and now that James was involved, it was still challenging for both of them. They had a few arguments about how to manage everything, small disagreements about how to discipline the children or who would take care of the chores. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, James and Lily sat down in the living room. The room felt heavy with unspoken words. James could tell that Lily was exhausted, and he felt the same way. He wanted to help, but sometimes he didn't know where to begin. "I know this isn't easy for you," Lily said, her voice soft but firm. "But I need you to step up. These kids need you." James felt a pang of guilt. He knew she was right. He had walked away from all of this, and now it was his responsibility to be here for them. But he didn't know if he was doing it right. He had always been focused on his career, thinking that work would make him happy, but now he was starting to realize that family, his family, was what he had been missing all along. "I'm trying," James said, his voice breaking slightly. "I want to be here for them. I want to be a good father, but it's harder than I thought. I'm scared I'll mess this up." Lily looked at him with understanding, her eyes softening. "James, it's okay. You're here now, and that's what matters. It will take time, but we'll figure it out together." James took a deep breath, feeling some of the weight lift off his shoulders. He had made a lot of mistakes, but now he had a chance to make things right. He couldn't change the past, but he could shape the future. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be more struggles ahead, but for the first time in a long time, James felt a sense of peace. He was a father now, and he was determined to be the father his children deserved. The road to redemption wasn't going to be perfect, but it was a road he was willing to walk. James woke up early the next morning with a sense of determination he hadn't felt in a long time. It was a new day, and he was ready to try harder, to be the father his children needed, and the partner Lily deserved. He had spent the past weeks getting to know his children, and though there were still moments of doubt, he felt something changing in himself. The kids were getting used to his presence, and slowly their interactions with him began to feel more natural. It wasn't perfect, but James felt a bond growing. He began to understand their little habits, like how Jordan loved to run around in the yard, or how Maya would curl up with a book and quietly flip through the pages. Noah's fascination with science meant that every time they went to the store, he'd ask questions about how things worked, and Ava's giggles became a source of joy in the house. Lily watched all of this from a distance, observing how James interacted with the children. She saw that he was trying, really trying, to make up for the time he had lost. She knew it wasn't easy, but she also knew that things couldn't go back to the way they once were. There was no simple fix, no way to erase the past. But there was something important happening. James was changing, and he was showing up for his family. One Saturday morning, as the family sat down to breakfast together, James had an idea. "How about we go to the park today?" he suggested. "We could have a picnic, play some games, and just spend time together." The kids cheered in excitement, and Lily gave him a small but genuine smile. She appreciated the effort. The days of rushing around, the tension, the uncertainty, it was all starting to feel like a thing of the past. At the park, James joined in the games, running after Jordan in a race, lifting Noah on his shoulders, and playing soccer with Mia and Ava. For the first time, James felt a sense of pride in the role he was playing in their lives. He wasn't just the man who had walked away. He was the father who was here now, making memories, even if they were simple moments. Later, as they sat on the grass, enjoying the picnic, Lily looked over at James. "I see you," she said quietly, "and I see how much you're trying." James glanced at her, his heart full. "I'm sorry for everything, Lily," he said. "I know I can't undo the past, but I'm here now, and I'm going to do everything I can for them." Lily nodded. "I know. It's going to take time, but I see the effort. I see how much you care now." For the rest of the day, they enjoyed each other's company, laughing and talking as a family. The kids were happy, and for once, James didn't feel like an outsider in his own home. He felt needed, he felt loved, and most importantly, he felt like he was part of something important. That night, as James tucked the children into bed, he paused for a moment, looking at their peaceful faces. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, and there would be challenges, but he knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face them. He had a family now. And no matter what, he was determined to never walk away again. He kissed each of them goodnight, whispering, "I love you," before closing the door softly behind him. James had found redemption, not through perfection, but through love, effort, and the willingness to change. He wasn't the man he used to be, but that was okay. The man he was becoming was the father his children deserved, and for the first time in a long time, he was proud of the path he was walking. James woke up early the next morning, feeling a sense of hope that had been missing for so long. He had been through a lot in the past months, confusion, regret, and doubt. But something was different now. He had started to see the possibility of a better future, one where he could be the father he always wanted to be, the one his children deserved. And most importantly, he could do this with Lily by his side. The past few weeks had been full of small steps forward. The kids were more comfortable with him, and he had been spending quality time with them, whether it was playing board games, taking walks in the park, or just sitting together watching movies. Every small moment felt like progress, and James was learning to appreciate the little things. He didn't take for granted the giggles from the children, or the quiet moments spent just being together. But even though things were better, James knew that he had a long road ahead. He couldn't erase the past, and he couldn't undo the mistakes he had made. But he also knew that he could keep moving forward, one step at a time. The first step, he realized, was talking to Lily about their future. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, James sat down with Lily on the couch. The room was quiet, and the weight of the moment wasn't lost on him. He had a lot to say, but he didn't want to rush it. "Lily," James started, his voice gentle, "I've been thinking a lot about us. About everything." Lily looked at him, her expression unreadable. She had heard this before, but this time it felt different. There was a sincerity in his voice that made her listen closely. "I know I've hurt you," James continued, "and I can't take that back. But I want you to know that I'm here now. I want to make things right, not just for me, but for us, for our family." Lily sat in silence for a moment, processing his words. James was afraid that she might shut him out, but she didn't. Instead, she spoke softly. "I know you're trying, James," she said, "and that means a lot. But I need to know that you're in this for the long haul. I need to know that you won't leave again." James nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "I'm not going anywhere, Lily. I've realized that this is where I need to be. With you. With our kids." The room was quiet, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke, but something had shifted between them. There was a sense of trust beginning to grow again. It wouldn't happen overnight, but it was a start. "I want to try too," Lily said finally, her voice soft. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to give it a chance. For the kids." James smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. This was the beginning of something new, a new chapter for their family. There would be challenges, of course, but James was ready. He was ready to put in the effort and work through the tough moments, no matter how difficult. The next morning, James woke up early again, this time with a renewed sense of purpose. He looked at the kids, who were waking up and running to him with smiles on their faces. They had become a part of him in a way he couldn't explain. Their laughter, their love, and even their challenges, everything felt like it mattered now. He knew that the journey was far from over, but he was finally ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, James felt hopeful about the future. And that, more than anything, was what kept him going. As he spent the day with his children, teaching them, playing with them, and just being present, James realized something important. Family wasn't just about being there physically. It was about being emotionally present, making the effort, and never giving up. This was his second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The road ahead might still be difficult, but James was ready for it. He wasn't just a father now. He was a father who had learned the value of love, responsibility, and commitment. And for the first time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Weeks passed, and James continued to make progress in his new role as a father. Every day was an opportunity for him to prove that he was there for his children and Lily, even though the road was still rocky. He knew that rebuilding trust took time, but he was willing to work at it, step by step. The family had become closer in ways James hadn't expected. He started to see the small moments of joy, like when Jordan asked him to help with his homework, or when Maya showed him a drawing she had made of their family. Even Noah's endless questions about the world were now met with answers and shared curiosity. James had always been focused on his work before, but now he found himself fully present, learning with his children and cherishing every simple moment. Lily also began to open up more. She had always been strong, raising the children on her own for so long, but now there was a quiet sense of peace between them. They didn't always agree on everything, but they were starting to communicate better, and that made all the difference. They had their own struggles, but they were learning how to face them together. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, James and Lily sat down to talk. The house was quiet, and the weight of the past seemed lighter now. The decision to give their relationship a second chance was hard, but it was beginning to feel like the right one. "James," Lily started, her voice soft, "I've been thinking a lot. I never thought we'd be here, but I'm glad we are. I think we're finally getting the hang of this, of being a family again." James looked at her, his heart full. "I know it hasn't been easy, but I'm proud of us. I'm proud of you, of everything you've done." and I'm thankful for the chance to be here for the kids. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to make up for them." Lily smiled at him, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "I know you are, and I can see how much you love them. It's been a long journey, but I think we're building something good here. It's not perfect, but it's real." James took her hand, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had been given a second chance, something he had never thought possible. And now he was determined to not waste it. The next day, as James played outside with the kids, he couldn't help but feel a new sense of purpose. He was no longer the man who had walked away from his family. He was the father who was there, learning every day how to do better. His children needed him, and he was ready to be the father they deserved. As they sat together on the porch that afternoon, Lily came outside with a big smile. "The kids wanted to ask you something, James." Jordan, Mia, Noah, and Ava gathered around him, each holding a handmade card. "We made these for you," Jordan said, handing James the first card. It read, "Best Dad Ever." Tears welled up in James's eyes as he looked at the simple message. "Thank you, kids," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This means everything to me." Lily watched from the doorway, a quiet smile on her face. She had seen how hard James had worked to become the father he was today. And while the past couldn't be erased, the future was still theirs to shape. Together, they had built something stronger than they had ever imagined. As the sun set and the family sat together on the porch, James realized that he had finally found what he had been looking for. It wasn't a career, it wasn't independence, it was family. And now, with his children by his side and Lily's support, he felt like he could face anything. The road ahead might not always be easy, but James knew that as long as they were together, they could overcome whatever challenges came their way. He was no longer just a father by name. He was a father who had learned the true meaning of love, commitment, and family. And that, more than anything, was worth fighting for.